Today, we're really getting into something fascinating and maybe a little unsettling. This whole world of AI companions.
Yeah, AI girlfriends, boyfriends, it's definitely a trend that's picking up speed.
We've been listening to a great discussion on the Tech and the Human Heart podcast. They had the host, Alex, and Dr. Riley Chen, who's a psychologist and a tech ethics expert.
A really insightful conversation.
So our goal here for you listening is to kind of unpack this. Why is it happening? Is it, a harmless modern thing, or are there real reasons to be concerned?
Exactly. The source episode was titled The AI Girlfriend-Boyfriend Trend. Is it healthy or dangerous? And that really frames the core question for you, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Is forming these, intimate emotional bonds with AI, is that okay? Is it a healthy way to cope, or is it maybe leading us down a path towards, I don't know, more isolation, unrealistic ideas about relationships?
That's the heart of it. And you see apps like Replica, EVA AI, Anima.
Yeah.
They're becoming quite popular.
Right. It suggests something significant is shifting in how at least some people are looking for connection.
Definitely a shift.
So let's start at the beginning. The why. What needs are these AI companions actually meeting? Or maybe what needs do they seem to meet?
Well, the podcast discussion really highlighted a few key drivers. Loneliness, for one, social anxiety is another big one.
Okay, so people who find real-world interactions may be difficult or stressful.
Precisely. And for them, the idea of an AI relationship one where you don't have that fear of saying the wrong thing or being rejected can seem incredibly appealing.
Ah, okay, well, let's talk about that control aspect. That feels really central here, doesn't it?
It does. The AI is built to be, well, always there, always responsive, giving instant validation.
And no rejection. Alex on the podcast pointed that out. That's a powerful draw, right? Especially if you've been hurt before.
A very powerful draw. That predictability, that feeling of safety. It's compelling. Alex used a great analogy, actually.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Called it emotional fast food.
Emotional fast food. Huh. I like that. Quick comfort, feels good in the moment.
Exactly. Quick gratification. But like actual fast food, does it give you the deep, long-term nourishment you need, the kind you get from, real human connection? Probably not.
Right. A quick fix versus something substantial. Okay. So that helps understand the why the need for connection, validation, maybe control. But how does it even work? How do people form emotional connections with code?
Well, this is where it gets kind of wild, technologically speaking. These AIs are getting incredibly sophisticated at mimicking emotional responsiveness.
Mimicking.
Yeah. They're programmed to sound affectionate, caring, even romantic, and our brains, well, Dr. Chen mentioned this, our brains process these emotional signals. And sometimes on an emotional level, the brain doesn't make a huge distinction between whether that signal comes from a human or a really clever AI.
Wow. Okay, hold on. So even if you know it's a program, your feelings can still react as if it's real.
It seems so. The emotional response can feel very genuine to the user. We hear reports all the time now from users saying they feel a real bond, real affection.
That's something. So the feeling is real for them.
The feeling can be, yes. But we always have to circle back to the source, right? It's a program designed, very deliberately, to trigger those feelings. Dr. Chen called it a fundamentally one-sided emotional investment.
One-sided. Okay. Now, the podcast wasn't all negative, right? They did talk about some potential, maybe, upsides. With caveats, of course.
They did, yeah. Carefully framed, but yes. The idea came up that for some people, maybe these AI companions could be a sort of transitional support.
Transitional, how so?
Like a low-stakes place to practice conversation skills, maybe? Or learn to express emotions a bit more comfortably, build a little confidence before engaging more with, actual people.
Like training wheels for social interaction. A safe space to practice.
Sort of, yeah. That's one way to think about it.
Yep.
But the experts are really clear on this. Moderation is absolutely key.
Right.
If it's used, it should ideally be a bridge towards human connection, not become a replacement that stops you from seeking it out.
Because if it does become a replacement, that's where the problems start. The podcast really hammered on the dangers of over-attachment, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They shared some pretty worrying examples, people spending huge amounts of time with their AI partners and pulling back from real life, friends, family, social stuff, just withdrawing.
And developing a real dependency, emotionally, maybe even sexually.
That risk is definitely there.
Hmm.
And they mentioned users getting genuinely upset, like experiencing actual heartbreak if that app glitches or the AI model gets an update that changes its personality.
Heartbreak over an update. Wow. That shows how deep the emotional investment can get, even if the other side is, well, an AI. It sounds like real grief.
It does sound like that. And it raises this really tricky question, you know? If the feelings are real for the person, does it matter that the source is artificial? Does that make the feelings less valid or less impactful?
That's a deep one. Real feelings, fake source. The podcast definitely wrestled with that, the sort of philosophical side. What did they land on?
Well, the main point seemed to be about the ethics and the psychology of that one-sidedness we mentioned. Your feelings might be totally authentic,
Right.
but the relationship itself lacks true mutuality. An AI can't make a sacrifice for you. It can't offer you genuinely challenging feedback that helps you grow. It doesn't understand you based on shared history.
It just reflects back what it's programmed to, essentially, based on your input.
Pretty much. It's not bringing its own independent thoughts or experiences to the table. It can't push back or disagree in a way that leads to real growth, like a human partner ideally would.
There's no friction, no need to compromise or negotiate differences.
Exactly. And the podcast really emphasized that those things, the negotiation, the compromise, working through conflict, that's how real relationships deepen and how we grow as people. AI just can't offer that.
Okay. Now, they shifted gears a bit to talk about a specific group. Younger users, teenagers. What were the concerns there? That sounded pretty serious.
Yeah, that definitely raised some red flags. A major concern is how these chatbots are sometimes marketed. They might start out seeming like a friendly tutor or just a friend, but the conversations can apparently shift very quickly towards romantic or even sexually explicit content.
Oh, wow. And for teenagers who are still figuring out relationships and intimacy?
Exactly. Developmentally, it's a crucial time. It can be really hard for them to distinguish between a programmed interaction designed to flatter or engage and the messy, complex reality of genuine human connection and consent.
So it could really warp their expectations of what healthy relationships look like.
Potentially, yes. That's a serious concern. Plus, the podcast mentioned the data privacy issue. These apps collect a lot of data, often from minors, and it's not always clear how that data is being used.
Right. Always the data. Okay, so given all these potential pitfalls, is there any way AI could be designed differently to be, helpful rather than harmful? They mentioned designing for health.
They floated that possibility. Maybe AI could work as a supportive tool in very specific ways, like an assistant for certain types of therapy exercises or a guided journaling tool, perhaps.
So framed clearly as a tool, not a partner.
That's the key distinction. The danger comes when it's marketed as a perfect romantic partner who never argues, always agrees, fulfills your every whim.
Because real life isn't like that. And that sets you up for massive disappointment in actual human relationships. You need that disagreement and compromise we talked about. AI can't teach you those skills.
Precisely. Which leads to thinking about the future, right? The podcast brought up people already having symbolic marriages to AI companions in some places.
Seriously, marrying an AI.
Symbolically, yes. And as the tech gets better, more realistic voices, emotional expressions may be integrated with VR, that line between artificial and authentic could get even blurrier for some.
That's a bit dystopian, isn't it? But as Dr. Chen pointed out, even if the simulation is perfect,
it still lacks that other person. That independent consciousness with their own inner life, their own flaws, their own capacity for real connection and growth. That fundamental difference remains.
the reciprocity just isn't there.
Never truly there.
So, okay, let's bring it back to the present. If someone listening feels they might be relying a bit too much on an AI companion, what advice did the podcast offer? How do you navigate that?
The first piece of advice was self-compassion. Don't judge yourself. Recognize that the AI is likely meeting some real underlying need, maybe for safety, control, acceptance, feeling heard.
Okay, start with understanding, not blame.
Exactly. Then get curious about those needs. What are they really? And then this is the crucial step. Start exploring ways to meet those needs in the real world. Through things like therapy, maybe joining community groups, reaching out to existing friends or family, basically taking steps towards building or strengthening human connections.
So acknowledge the need the AI is filling, then gently try to find healthier human ways to fill it instead, even if it feels riskier.
That's the idea. Because the podcast made a good point. Real love, real connection, it does involve risk, vulnerability.
Yeah.
AI offers connection without the risk, but maybe also without the real reward.
That makes sense. So the big takeaway message seems to be about balance, right?
Definitely. AI might have a place as a supportive tool, maybe, but it shouldn't become your main source of emotional support, your primary world. They had a final analogy for that.
Ah, yes. The supplement idea. Tell us about that.
The analogy was, think of AI as a potential supplement, but never a replacement for genuine human connection.
Like a vitamin supplement versus actual food.
Kind of, yeah. It might offer something specific in a limited way, but it can't replace the whole complex, messy, wonderful thing that is real human interaction. That's where, as the podcast put it, the magic happens.
The magic happens in the messiness. I like that. Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive. We've seen AI companions offer this semblance of connection, which is really appealing, especially if you're lonely or anxious.
Uh-huh. But it's a connection that's missing core ingredients of human relationships, that mutuality, growth through difference, shared history, real intimacy.
And leaning too heavily on it can lead to isolation, warped expectations, big concerns, especially for younger people.
Right. So while AI might have a role as a tool sometimes, it absolutely shouldn't replace the real deal.
Okay, so that leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on.
As this technology gets better and better at mimicking us, at mimicking connection, how is that going to change how we understand love, connection itself, even how we see ourselves?
And what did that mean for society in the long run as these lines between what's artificial and what's authentic get, well, increasingly blurry? Something to think about.